Hello and welcome to my channel, From Profession to Passion, with me, Vicky Mittman. The purpose of this channel is to inform and inspire professionals to live their careers on their terms. Whilst the traditional route in many professions may work well for some, it isn't for everyone, and there are different ways of doing things. On this channel, I'll be sharing my own story of how I combined my profession in law with my passion for coaching and mentoring, and I'll be interviewing other professionals who've developed their own side hustles, changed career directions altogether, or found some other way to involve their passions in their professional lives. So today I'm joined by Stacey, who's a good friend of mine. We've actually known each other since law school when we were baby lawyers back in, like 14 years ago. And Stacey was an employment lawyer for many years, first in London and then a top tier firm in Australia after that. And she had a love of photography, which came about after she had her daughter in 2017. And that hobby and love of photography has grown into a side hustle. So in the last year, Stacey's really focused more and more on that business. And I would love for her to share a bit more of her story with us today and to see what she wished she'd known or done differently if she could do it all again. So Stacey, do you want to tell us a bit more about your photography business?
Sure. Hi, Vicky. So as you said, I spent a long time in the law. I was in the law for 12 years all up. I had 2 babies during that time, and it was on maternity leave with my second that I decided enough was enough and it was time for me to make the leap. So I had always liked photography, but to be honest, I'd never even owned a manual camera until I had Holly. And this is a really common story that you hear from photographers. It's very common for women to go off on maternity leave, find a love of photography when they have their babies, and for that to kind of grow. And that's exactly what happened to me. I started taking pictures of Holly, then I took pictures of my friends' kids, and then eventually somebody asked my friend what my rates were and what my availability was like, which all felt very strange at the time. My very first job was I shot a baby shower. I travelled about an hour on public transport to get there, spent 3 hours at this baby shower, an hour back, however long I would have taken to edit it, and that was for the princely sum of $100. So I like with everything, these side hustles always start small, and I absolutely never had an intention to become a photographer. It was never in the plan. I never saw myself leaving law. I really enjoyed employment law actually. But as I went through my career, as I had my children, as the world really changed and COVID threw us all a curveball, it became increasingly clear to me that my values didn't necessarily match those of a top tier serious corporate practice. It wasn't something that was serving me particularly. I formed my company in 2019 for tax reasons, really, more than anything else. And that was the point at which I decided to tell work. And I have to say, I wouldn't say it was enthusiastically received that I had this side business. So this was something that I found particularly difficult in this whole process, actually, because there are plenty of lawyers who train for marathons, play cricket, have really time-consuming hobbies. And as far as I was concerned, this was a hobby for me. And really, I was earning, before I went full-time with it, I was maybe earning $1,000, $1,500, like we're talking £500, £750 a month. That was all I was bringing in. I was doing a handful of jobs each month. And it was because that was my me time. I loved it. It was mostly for people that I knew. And the reason I set up the company was so that I could put the money through the company and buy myself more gear. It made financial sense for me I was basically just earning to feed my hobby. That was the only reason that I was doing it. And so the resistance that I felt from the firm was really surprising to me. And it also was quite demoralizing. I found it really demoralizing, actually. I found that there was a real lack of acceptance of this hobby that I had simply because it made money, I think. But as far as I was concerned, it didn't take up any more time or take me away from my job any more than my children or someone else's long distance ocean swimming hobby. So I found that tricky, tricky to position with them. I pretty much just hid it after that. So I didn't really talk about it. And I had this almost secret side hustle that I had for quite a while. Um, and so I guess all of that fed in again into the values and the amount that this job wanted from me and demanded from me versus what I was getting from it at that point in my life. So when COVID kind of came and disrupted the world, I was on parental leave. I'd gone on parental leave about a week before the world went loopy. And I decided towards the end of 2020, I decided that I would like to give it a go. I felt that going back to my corporate job wasn't going to be the right thing for me. So one way or another, I was probably going to be looking for a new job anyway. And I decided I wanted to give it a try. I felt like it was now or never. I was in this phase of my life. I do predominantly, almost exclusively family photography. I'm in a phase of my life where I know lots and lots of people having babies, have mothers groups. I'm kind of in that world, in that network. And I felt that now was the right time to give it a bash, really. And I gave myself a year to see how it went. And so far, pretty good.
COVID year that was. So that wasn't a real year, it was a COVID year.
So I started in January 2021 and had a really great first half of the year. So in Australia, our financial year ends on the 30th of June. So I kind of got to the 30th of June and I'd made $50,000, which was a huge sum for me, given that it was effectively a brand new business, which previously $1,000 a month or something. So I was so super proud of that. I had bookings for the next 3 months. Everything was great. And then on the 26th of June, we went into lockdown and stayed there for 4 months. So anyway, that led to various pivots and side hustles branching off from my photography business, which have also been great fun and really successful, and more successful than I could have predicted that they would be. But that's kind of where I am at the moment. And yeah, it's been a lot of fun, and I don't have, even despite COVID taking my business away overnight, I don't regret the decision one bit.
That's really amazing. And I think there are two things that really stood out. One was the potential sort of reaction from the firm, which I think a lot of people are nervous about when they're in professions, and I'll come back to that in a second. But the other thing was, the fact you've also created secondary side hustles as a result of COVID. So you've actually become really good at pivoting yourself for a market that is available. And I'd love to hear more about those in a second. But I think as well, the first time when I said I was going to step out of law, and I haven't left law, I'm still a lawyer and I'm still able to practice, I still consult, but I also run a business on the side, and it's very different to being full-time engaged in a firm. But when I was full-time engaged in a firm, the idea of getting off that well-trodden path, that where you're a trainee, then you qualify, then you're an associate and a senior associate, then a partner, there was no way out of it that allowed a bit more flexibility and allowed me to do something else. And nobody said, well, if you want to be a lawyer 3 days a week and do something else, that's cool. No, and I realized there are part-time lawyers, but it was just not something I'd ever talked about. It was very much a case of we need more hours, more billing to be able to progress, and that was the only option. So it wasn't until I took a step back and thought, a bit like you did, like where the values and the mission was for me and how well that fitted in with my corporate law career. I didn't see myself sitting there forever. So then I thought, well, how else can I do it? And I was lucky that I found a boutique franchise firm that I could work with and carry on my legal work. And that's been brilliant. That's allowed so much flexibility. But then it took me a while to really figure out what I wanted to do and the coaching side. But it's nice actually that you said a lot of women, when they have children, they get into photography as a result of that, because it's a passion now that you can live as a lifestyle and a business, but something you love doing because of something that happened in your life that was already amazing. I think that's really, really cool.
Having children is such a clear biological delineation in your life. This is it. You go from needing no flexibility according to employers to needing lots and lots of flexibility. And of course, there are all these flex appeal campaigns which are trying to land this idea that that's not true. And there's plenty of people who need and want flexibility, even if they don't have kids. But having kids was simultaneously tricky career-wise, because obviously there are these people demanding your time, and there's this huge juggle which everybody knows all about. But it's also freeing, because all of a sudden it's almost like they understand that you need to leave on time. They understand that you have other priorities. They expect it.
Yeah.
And
They
I
expect
think
you to go and get your kids from nursery or from school. Like, that's okay. That's allowed. You
they
can
don't
leave
always
the
love it. 5.
Yeah.
but they it's objectively easy to understand. And I
Mm.
think that that's often a point in our lives where so much shifts for so many people. It's a natural point in our lives where we reconsider what's important to us and what our values are and where we want to allocate our time. But it's also a point where you can take a little more flexibility in your career, ironically, because the demands on your time become so much more significant. But ironically, it's kind of freeing. I found it kind of freeing in a way. But for me, I felt, because I would have really enjoyed, actually, I would have really liked to work 3 days a week in my job and done photography more seriously. So done it 2 days a week more seriously than I was previously. But I never had that conversation, because I never believed that it would be entertained.
No.
And so I never bothered. I think that's a shame.
Yeah, and I think some of that might come from you fearing they'll probably say no anyway, but also it's probably because you didn't see many people before you who'd done it. You didn't know several 3-day-a-week
Exactly.
law firm employees who also have these exciting businesses and side hobbies which earn them money on the side. And therefore, no one, you didn't think to say, how did you do that? Who did you ask? It's obviously a possibility. And I think you're right. A lot of people probably think, oh, it's not done. And I certainly felt like it wasn't done. And I almost felt guilty. Like, when I was really interested at the beginning in my coaching learning, it was probably about 7 or 8 years ago, all of my reading outside of law, and bear in mind, you stare at screens for a long time every day looking at documents. I was loving, when I got home, I'd be reading about mindset and confidence and motivation and creating this team where people are empowered and passionate about things. And I was like, this is amazing. This should be something I do. Wish I could do this for a living. And now I am doing it for a living, and I am being paid to do it, and it's incredible. But no one at the time said, oh yeah, leave law or branch out slightly. There's these options for you. And even 3 years ago, when I said to some of my, or 3.5 years now, when I said to some of my colleagues, I'm moving, I'm not going to a different firm as such, but I am consulting still, and I'm going to run a business. And even my friends at my age, or within 5-10 years of me, were all like, oh, are you sure? Because you're in this really safe employed position at this really good firm. And it was a good firm, and I really enjoyed my time there, but it just wasn't quite fitting me, and I wasn't fitting it. And I think we both knew that, probably. And I'm so much more aligned to my own goals now, and I think about it every day. I think about the kind of clients I want to work with, and I don't have to just do something because a file is put on my desk and the partner in my team says deal with this matter. Like, that doesn't happen anymore, and that's very freeing. And I think that flexibility, that freedom from having to work in a certain way for certain clients, for certain bosses, didn't really fill me with joy. And now I get to think, who do I want to work with? And that's a very different way to start the day.
As I said, I never even considered really asking them whether I could split my week, whether I could do 3 days for them and 2 days for myself. I never even considered it, because I feel like I knew what the answer would be.
Yeah.
And that I think is a shame. I think that businesses have to look more long term at the happiness of their employees, and also the other thing that I think is really important to know is that you don't have to slam doors when you leave, and nothing has to be final. Like, these decisions no decision necessarily has to be forever. And so I went into this running my own business on the basis that I was going to give it 12 months and see. I didn't know for sure that I was going to enjoy being my own boss. I didn't know for sure that I was going to enjoy everything that came with running my own business. I didn't know if I'd be able to make enough money. I just didn't know. I didn't know if taking my hobby and making my hobby my job would lose all the enjoyment in my hobby. because I am now in that position where my hobby is my job, so it's not necessarily my hobby anymore, and now I'm hobbyless. So
Don't worry, you can always
find
find
a
new
hobby.
hobbies.
Yeah, I think that you know, I was worried. I didn't know what would happen with that. I didn't know how long I would enjoy that for. I still don't know. You know, if you ask me, I'm 36, do I want to be chasing toddlers around a park at 56? I don't know. I'm not that fit, really. Or bending over newborns, and you know, it's a physical job,
And
and
carrying
is
all
that
the
something?
equipment with you everywhere you go. That might not be something you want to do forever, but for now it works for you.
But for now, and then I'm also a great believer. I think one of the things you also said, which really resonated with me, is the freedom. And it's almost like I was in this career for 12 years being required to do X, Y, Z. I had to do a certain amount of BD, of business development. I had to do a certain number of hours. I had to do things in a certain way.
Yeah.
It was all, there was very little scope for creativity. Law has a degree of creativity to it, you know, the problem solving element, which is always what attracted me to it. That's always what I've enjoyed, the communication and the solving of a problem. That's always what I liked about my job. But there wasn't really true freedom to be creative about the way that we do things, especially in a large firm. Both firms that I worked for are very large,
Yeah.
and they're very there's a way of doing things.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, when you work for certain partners, they have a way, and they aren't interested in changing it a lot of the time. And one of the things that I have loved about going out on my own and running my own business is the freedom to do whatever I think is the right thing to do. There's nobody here telling you it's not the way we do things. I found that a very restrictive and frustrating element of being in law.
Yeah, it's a
And
very it's an old-fashioned culture, like that's the way we do things around here. And I think most companies probably know what, all firms know that that's the way they do things around here, but a lot of them as well, certainly. I mean, some of the companies I work with are so much more visionary in a case of, well, we've done it that way and it's worked, but is there a better way? How are we innovating? And I fear that probably some of the traditional professions, and it's not just law, I'd imagine there are other professions as well that have that same sort of, well, this is the way that works best, so we're doing it this way. And there's no kind of like, well, do things change? Do attitudes change over time? Do clients' desires and the way they want to do things change over time? Of course they do. So if we're not changing with it, we're falling behind, and that's a real risk in bigger firms particularly, and probably big organizations as well. But one thing as well that struck me when you were giving us a bit of an overview of your story first is that you've developed secondary side hustles alongside your photography business. And I think that's great, because probably, like you said, there was an initial trepidation to even commit fully to photography in the first place, from your guarded and protected and secure profession, and employment that went with that. But did you find it easier with the secondary side hustles, just saying, yeah, let's go for it, let's fill a gap in the market, people are asking for this, I can do that? Was that a much more natural step in? Because I think, now that I've side hustled once, I reckon I could do it more easily next time, because now what you didn't know then.
It's addictive. It's addictive, isn't it? When you have an idea and it works, and you're like, oh wow, it's so cool. And I think the other, yes is the answer to your question. Yes, it was definitely easier once I'd taken this big leap. It was much easier to take smaller leaps. And I think being a small business, I mean, I am just me at the moment, but even being in a smaller business with like a handful of people, the amount that you can influence, the scope to try new things is so much greater than being in a big organization where there's a lot of red tape and bureaucracy and people to say no or yes to whatever you want to do. I had a lot of clients asking me, so what gear do you use? Where did you learn? Did you go on a course? Can you recommend something? And the honest truth is, I've done a bunch of courses, online, in person, and I've never found one in person that I found really helpful. The turning point for me actually was half an hour sat down with a friend of my husband's, who is a wedding photographer, and I'd been on a few courses and just couldn't seem to nail it. This is right back at the beginning, and he sat me down, pressed a couple of buttons, showed me a couple of tricks and sent me on my way. And that was it. That half an hour was kind of the trigger for really vastly improving my photography. So what I did was speak to these clients who'd all expressed an interest, and I put together a course for them. So I took them out to my favorite location at sunset. We had basically an hour course looking at their cameras, talking about the functions. And then a friend of mine came along with her son, and we did a live mini shoot, and they were able to put their skills. So watch me work. So watch how I approach it. And they were all clients. So they'd all had firsthand experience of me working already.
Yeah.
And then they got to do it. So that went really well. I had also sold out one of those classes when we went into lockdown in Sydney. So I transferred that online, and that went really well too. And that's something that I'll probably do more of in the future.
Yeah.
And then my other pivots have been during lockdown, I spent a lot of time on my admin. So as a lawyer, very left-brained, I like things to be slick and efficient, and I don't like to retype an email 100 times. So I make full use of my client management system, and I automate everything that I can, and I have lots of different workflows and processes built into it, which I've spent a lot of time doing.
Yeah.
And again, I realized that most of my photography friends have not done that. They're paying $400 a year for this software and not using it anywhere near its full potential. So one of my lockdown projects was to help a couple of them. I set up their system for them and quickly realized that was something I could monetize.
Yeah.
And that took me through lockdown. That was really popular and is still quite popular. And I think that there's a whole separate business in that, which I'm exploring.
Yeah,
and
like photography administration, effectively, because there's a lot that comes with running your own business. It's not just delivering the product or service, it's all of the other stuff, and certainly there is a lot that goes with it. And I reckon that your photography friends will be massively helped by your knowledge, because you've been there and done it. But also it's that kind of course, let's work out what systems you've got and how to use them effectively. If someone had done that for me early on and said, this is where there's a gap, you need a system that does this, it would have been so helpful. It would have saved months of tearing my hair out thinking, what do I do about this, and going about it the long way. So I think when you're and I'm certainly coaching a lot of professionals now who are saying they want to make these changes, where do they even start? Having some of those basics is really important, and that's such a good way of helping people that in the same industry and the same sort of idea.
Yeah, so and that's totally right. I think all of us who have gone from side hustle to business have probably wished that we'd set it up properly in the beginning, taken a bit more time to set it up in the beginning, perhaps outsourced that. I think that that's a really common issue that comes up. And I think especially in my industry, photography, I said before that a lot of my peers came into it when they became parents. Again, once you're a parent, if you've got a job and you're a parent and you have this side hustle that is gaining momentum, then all of that admin it's never going to get done. There's just no time in your world for it. But if you can do it, it will save you hours. It's this horrible catch-22, which is where the service came into it. One of the really nice things about working for yourself is that when something like that happens, you have the freedom to pursue it. You can just decide that this is where I want to put my energy. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't.
I spent my time in law mainly advising commercial clients, and I knew a lot about it, but until I was living it myself, it was a really different, it was totally different how it actually felt to doing it as to advising on it. So actually having that now, I think probably makes me a better lawyer for commercial clients, because I get
I agree.
And that's not something you expect your average 22, 23, 24-year-old lawyer to have that commercial experience as well. But I think now it really complements that side of me. So, and it would for you too. I would imagine, whilst you're not practicing at the moment, you still have a practicing certificate or the ability to have one. So actually you could always go back into law if you wanted to, but that would have to be because you desperately wanted to, rather than because it was needed. Like there's so many other skills you have now.
We live in a world now where it's completely acceptable and actually in many cases encouraged to have many different iterations of your career, and everything that I am learning, everything that you are learning, this would make me a better lawyer. It absolutely would. And you're quite right. If and when I ever go back into a corporate setting, first of all, I'll have a bunch of experience, life experience, client experience, ideas of how to deal with people and problems, and all of this agile thinking I felt was squashed a little bit being in a large corporation. These kind of these skills that I have that are coming to the fore now that I work for myself, that will stand me in good stead. But I also just think that I would go back into it with a lot more commitment and clarity and understanding of what I want to achieve, what makes me happy. And those things are what make us successful. And I think the problem for me was that I'd gone down this blinkered path. I didn't have the courage. There were various points when, you know, in life, there are various points when you could step off or into different paths, and I never took them. They always required more courage and bravery than I had at the time. And I was always happy enough where I was. And I think that the further you go down that path without it being 100% right for you, in a funny way, that makes it easier to step off, because the clearer it is that this isn't right for you, the easier it is to step off and take the risk to find something that is more right for you. But you're completely right. If I then step back onto that treadmill, then it would be a very different mindset, a very different approach that I would have to my career. Different things are important to me, and I've learned so much doing my own business that I would never go back to exactly what I was doing before, albeit I still enjoy employment law. I still think it's interesting. I still enjoy problem solving and, you know, that side of things. So I think it's been a really amazing experience going out on my own. I don't have any plans to stop that anytime soon.
Yeah, no, it sounds like it's going brilliantly.
But I'm also very open-minded to what my future looks like now. Whereas I think in a traditional career, that's mapped out for you from the moment you enter the organization.
You always know what the next step is. Like in 2 years, you'll be applying for senior associate, that kind of thing. And that's decided on your, you know, how much you're billing, how many years qualified you are. Again, something that happens in other professions as well. I think there is this sort of assumption that if for some reason you're not moving to that next step, something's wrong. But I wanted to run my own business and be in control of my own life, and that's not for everybody. I've spoken to a few people who said, I really want to do what you've done, but it's become very clear that taking that risk and that step for them is just sending them into a tailspin, and that's not right for them. So, you know, some of the coaching I've done is about actually figuring out what you want your life to look like and how you can best achieve that, not completely in your comfort zone, because I think you do need to take a step out of that occasionally. But if someone really doesn't want the hassle of running their own business, and it is a hassle, there are lots of things that you've got to learn and you've got to know, and you take all the responsibility. If someone doesn't want that, then it's not for them, and they shouldn't be encouraged to throw their life savings into running their own business, because it's never going to, you know, never going to excite them. They're never going to have the same enjoyment from it because they're scared. Whereas I was excited. I was thinking, what can I do? How can it work? And, you know, if not this, then what about that? And that's not a mindset I really had in my law firm. In fact, I'd say I was probably a much more fixed mindset in my legal role, my full-time legal role, employed. Whereas now I've got a bit more of a growth mindset. And I think actually, you know, how could I also help my clients with this or that? There are different packages that are coming to me because I'm listening more. And I'm thinking, well, why couldn't I do X, Y, and Z, rather than, well, that's not what we do around here. We do this, not that. So, well, that's amazing, Stacey. And I think you've given, probably people watching this will have resonated with that and taken from it. But what's one thing I'd love to ask is what's the one thing you wish you'd known, or the few things you'd wish you'd known when you started? If you could go back in time, what would you wish you'd known?
Basic business. Again, a big disadvantage of having spent my entire career in large corporate is that I had no training in the mechanics of running a business. I still have none, and I still make mistakes, and I have a great accountant who saves me regularly. I have outsourced design and website and all of those things that I just don't know how to do. I've learned that outsourcing is super important because you put your energy somewhere that you can add value. So I think that the value of setting up properly in the first place, and that's what I am helping people do with my Tidy Talk as well, from a customer experience side, it's setting that business up so it's a real business. It's not just a mum with a camera firing off emails from her iPhone. This is a slick company that you're dealing with, and it's important for your clients to feel that comfort. If they're spending a significant amount of money, it has impact on your bottom line. And I think setting things up properly, outsourcing earlier, getting help where I outsourced my accounts very early. And I'm so glad that I did. I should have outsourced other stuff.
There are things where just outsourcing earlier is a great deal, because it takes away that stress, that kind of, well, I'm doing my day-to-day work, which is bringing in the money, which is important, it's what I want to do, but I've also got to think about the website. And that's the bit you don't want to do, because you can't be bothered, or you've written the content and you think it's okay, but you're not sure. And actually that process just like lingering over you and hanging over you as you like get down your to-do list and it still hasn't been done, you think, oh, maybe I'll think about it tomorrow. It's too much extra weight to carry when you've got so much going on.
It curbs your entrepreneurialism and it curbs your creativity. It's a bit like I outsource cleaning of my house.
Yeah.
That is something I don't do myself.
Yeah.
I just don't see the point. I have 2 little kids, they make heaps of mess, and I just don't see why I should be spending half a day on my precious weekends cleaning my house when I can pay someone who can do it better.
Yeah.
It helps somebody else with their business, you know, like it's just, there's no sense in doing everything yourself. And I think all of us, everybody who has started a business, here's this piece of advice: outsource quickly and outsource properly. And all of us go, yeah, but that's for people with a bit more money. Then, like, that's once your business is up and running, that's for people who can afford it. And every single time I've outsourced, I've just thought, not only was that money well spent, but that money would have been better spent this time last year. Every time I've outsourced.
Oh, completely. And no one has ever outsourced and thought, oh, you know what, I'm sick of outsourcing, I'm going to bring that really hideous task back to myself and do it myself. Nobody thinks that. Once they've outsourced, it's gone for good, and they're usually delighted by the result, and they think, oh, I wish I'd known this sooner. But I think that's a great tip.
I've spent 2 years doing my own bookkeeping. So I have an accountant, but I've always done my own receipts and whatnot in Xero. And she said to me at our last catch up, would you like us to do that for you, because we can do that for you for $50 an hour? And I just thought, I can't believe I must have turned this down at some point in the past. This isn't the first time she's offered this. And every month it comes up in my calendar, I've got to do my reconciliations, and every month I put it off. And why? How silly to save $50 a month. I mean, my time is so much better somewhere else, and
and it's more valuable for you. Like you can pay someone to spend several hours a month doing your bookkeeping, because you're earning more doing your service that you love to provide.
Exactly. I just think taking those burdens off yourself and focusing in on what it is that what value you are adding to your business, what value you have to the world, what you can offer, and giving yourself a bit of space as well, because that's where these other ideas come up. So the other thing that I was pretty keen on doing when I decided to go into my business full time was to have half a day a week for me, not for work, but for me. So that is something that I have absolutely not stuck to and not achieved. And is something which will be a New Year's resolution for me when I get back to Sydney. I find that having that time where you're not thinking about your business, every single time it benefits your business. It's that classic thing of people thinking of solutions to problems in the shower. You need time away from it to improve it, because if you're in your business all the time and you're not working on your business in the broader sense, then you just become a doer. And I am by nature a doer. Like you give me work to do and I will just one foot in front of the other until it's done. That was my thing. That was what I had in my reviews for over a decade.
It means you're productive and efficient, and that's great, but it doesn't allow for that entrepreneurial creativity that we all need. And I couldn't agree more. Like, taking time for you has got to be crucial when you're an entrepreneur.
Yes, I completely agree.
Great. Well, it's been amazing chatting to you again. I know we could talk about this for hours, but I really hope people that have watched this video will find it useful. And Stacey, if anyone wants to get in touch with you, how do they do that?
So Instagram, I am Stacey Rolfe Photography, STACEY ROLFE, all the E's, or it's hello@StaceyRolfePhotography or www.staceyRolfePhotography.com. So you can find me under that handle anywhere you look.
Yeah, and I definitely recommend having a look, because Stacey's got some fantastic photos, and I'm not a natural photographer. Like if I get a slightly wonky photo when I'm on holiday, I'm pleased with that, but what Stacey does is absolutely above and beyond. So yeah, check her out on Instagram and her website. But also, you know, if anyone who's watched this video wants to get in touch, there are going to be some links below to my contact details. And I would say one of the things I wish I'd had when I was first stepping out into business is people that had done similar things, and people who had maybe got off that corporate track in a profession that they've been on for years and didn't know there was a way out. Find people who have done it, like me and Stacey, come and have a chat to us, because most people are really happy to share their experiences. And just don't be stuck thinking you've got to do it that way forever. There are many different ways of going forward. Thank you for watching this video, and I hope it's provided some food for thought. If you've enjoyed it, please subscribe below and feel free to like or comment. I'd love to know what you think. If you're interested in hearing more about this, please join my Facebook community, From Profession to Passion with Vicky Mittman. I'll see you next time.